how long have you guys been living aboard your boat?
We moved aboard on, I guess, October 31st, 2001. That was a previous boat. I retired that afternoon, we moved aboard that night and left the next morning.
What was that, an impulsive move?
Not at all.
Not at all. It was 11 years into a 10-year plan.
Okay.
We stayed on that boat until 2000, the very end of 2006, end of 2006. We moved back aboard this boat this was August, 3 years ago. We were aboard
October
3 years ago. That's right. We bought the boat in August, we were aboard in October. And we've been on this boat pretty much since then. We took a year off. We moved back aboard this spring. April of this year, 2011.
Okay. And what kind of boat is this?
This is an Allied Seawind 2, built in 1978.
Okay.
And it's a ketch, and it's essentially an offshore cruising boat.
And what is it about this boat in particular that drew you to her?
It was an offshore cruising boat. That's what we had done with our first boat, which is the Valiant 40. And we wanted a boat, A, that we could afford, that was necessary, and B, that if we chose to continue sailing offshore, we wanted a boat that would do it. Those two criteria together limited the options a lot. There are a lot of offshore boats, and there are a lot of boats we could afford, but there weren't too many that were both of those things.
Okay. And where all have you guys cruised to? That might be a huge question.
Well, it's not that really. We've spent 5 winters, I think, in the Bahamas.
Something like that.
Something like 5 winters. We've sailed offshore from Norfolk direct down to the U.S. Virgin Islands, about 1,500 miles. From there, we went down as far as Trinidad, which actually sits inside the coast of Venezuela. You could look north from where we were and see the coast of Venezuela. In terms of north, we've been as far north as Nova Scotia.
We've transited the ICW 12 times.
Yeah, I think 12 transits on the Intracoastal. Either the whole thing or parts of it, but we've come between Florida and up here about a dozen times.
Where would you say was your favorite port to pull into?
Trinidad.
How Trinidad?
Yeah.
What is it about Trinidad that appealed to you guys so much?
The people. They're just a fun-loving group of folks who enjoy life a lot.
They're generally bright, outgoing,
educated, certainly compared to other places in the Caribbean. Trinidad has its own economy exclusive of tourism, so they don't have any feeling that you owe them. You get that a lot. We felt that we got that a lot in some of the other islands in the Caribbean. And they just had so much fun. The people there, they party a lot. We were there for 3 months, including the carnival.
and they partied hard. I mean, they partied most of the night, got up the next day, went to work, and partied again for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
3 or 4 weeks, constantly.
Yeah. And how hard did you party with them?
Not that hard.
Much.
But you certainly enjoyed watching them party, I take it.
That, and I think by virtue of having their own economy, they were much more sophisticated themselves. Not they had more sophisticated places, because I don't think they did, but the people there were more interesting than we found a lot of the other folks in the Caribbean. Most of the Caribbean that we saw was geared toward tourism. And you'd go to a resort, or we didn't use marinas, so we never went to a resort. But you'd anchor and you'd see the things that they wanted you to see and pay, for the most part, outrageous prices. We like to live like the locals live. And in Trinidad, that was just a lot of fun. They liked puns. English was their native language, and you could understand them. In a lot of the other Caribbean countries, we found that although English might be the native language, it was a version of English that was what they knew, and it just wasn't something that was understandable to us unless they made an effort.
Well, the Trinis kind of did that too.
Yeah, they had their own.
They kind of had their own language that was pretty hard to distinguish. But they could also speak very plain English, so even I could understand them.
Would you say that that aspect of being able to travel but not be considered a tourist per se is part of what drives you to sail around and visit these places by boat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, our next favorite place, and I don't think we have any disagreement about this, is the Bahamas, which is very close. But when you sail there, you're generally accepted by the local folks as just part of the landscape. They do depend heavily on tourism. But again, there's no animosity, there's no feeling that you're an other. You're very much accepted into the crowd there.
One of the other people that we interviewed said that cruising into some place, you're unexpected. You're not part of the big brouhaha of a cruise ship or the expected delivery of people on an airplane, and that kind of creates a whole different vibe as you arrive because you're not greeted by all the craziness of the
No, you
tourist
just
trade.
kind of show up with no hoopla. Sing you sure, do whatever you have to do to check into a foreign country. And
What is that like, checking into foreign countries? Is it pretty much the same everywhere you go? Or?
No. Some places, Martinique, it was difficult to find a place to check in. You end up having to walk, 2-3 miles?
right, we found other cruisers who all wear the same uniform, the boat shoes and the shorts and the t-shirt and the backpack and the big hat. And we found some that spoke English to tell us where to go check in because everybody else, including the immigrations and customs people, spoke French, and we don't.
On the other hand, in the Bahamas, this last time we went to a place in Andros, and drop your anchor, dinghy ashore, go to the local bar, borrow a cell phone from the bartender, call customs, they drive out from the airport, and you sit and visit with them for half an hour while you check in.
Well, one of the local guys there makes you a good fresh salad.
That sounds very pleasant.
It was great.
Yeah. Other places checking into St. Martin, St. Bart's, those places, the people are just businesslike. So, no, it varies a lot from place to place.
When you first started sailing, what was the motivation to head out?
Sailing or cruising?
Cruising. What were you hoping to accomplish when you first left? And did those expectations of what you were heading out to do change as you continued along?
I think we both wanted an adventure, and that's cruising certainly qualifies, and to see different places and meet different people and do it as long as it's fun.
I would agree with that exactly. And yes, it met the expectations.
Yeah. You sailed into the Caribbean. The ICWs are fairly, I assume, kind of easy to sail because it's protected. But when you move out to someplace like the Caribbean, did you encounter any bad weather while you were out there? What was that experience like?
In all the time we were sailing, we were in a grand total, which is almost 10 years, cruising. I've been sailing my whole life.
35,000, 40,000 miles?
About 35,000 miles. We've been in one storm. And the storm part lasted one day. That was on the first trip offshore.
Mm-hmm.
We've done two-week offshore trips. And the first one, we were about 300-400 miles south of Bermuda. And we were listening to the weather on a shortwave radio, which is how you get your weather offshore. You can't get a forecast that's going to last for 2 weeks that you can rely on.
Right.
And we heard, you're going to have a gale 3 days hence. Okay, that's not a big deal. It's 35 knots. You can handle that. Then the next day, Herb, who's the weather forecaster, he's probably 40, 45 knots. At this time, we're way too far from any land to even consider trying to go to land. Okay, well, that's, going to be a little rough, but all right. On the third day, says, hate to tell you this, but tomorrow you're going to see 55 knots, gusting 60, 65. That's hurricane force. Seas 20, maybe 30 feet.
Average, which means some of them are a lot higher.
And it's the North Atlantic in November, what can I say? And the scary part was waiting. Because, you could batten everything down, you could tie everything you could think of.
And then you just sit and you wait, knowing it's just not going to be fun. And you wait.
The calm before.
No, it wasn't.
It
calm.
wasn't real calm then either, but knowing what was coming, and knowing there wasn't any, we'd already done everything we could do to prepare. So we were just waiting, knowing we were going to get slammed.
The storm itself was not scary. It was incredibly loud. If you've ever seen
Perfect Storm?
the Perfect Storm, the movie,
And it was quiet
then in that movie it was quiet. And that
compared to what we
just
had.
laughed because it wasn't like that at all. The boat we were in, the Valiant, had two settees, about the same layout as this, and we were probably 4 feet apart, yelling. You couldn't hear each other. And we hove to, which is a way of basically putting the boat in park. Went below. You couldn't see anything. You couldn't do anything anyway. And we were below for about 22 hours. And at times the boat was literally underwater. The waves would wash over the whole boat. And looking back, it sounds scary, but it wasn't. And after 22 hours, the winds lightened up a bit, and we were able to get underway again.
Yeah.
The only damage was I was thrown actually from one side of the boat to the other, and hit my head. And it's bloody if you cut your head. It wasn't bad though. I didn't need any stitches or anything.
And then the spinnaker pole came loose.
You guys moving
Well, in
around.
this shot, you've got the boats behind them.
Yeah.
Going like this.
Yeah, well,
Pick up the motion.
the river out there, all the wakes from that come right in here. Now it's got to go around the corner to get to Port A. So Port A is a lot calmer than this place.
So, when you guys made the decision to start cruising, take off, go kind of beyond the normal life, what was the reaction from your friends, your family, who said you're going to drop it all and head out?
I think most of them were excited. This was something that I'd wanted to do since 1976. So most people who knew me, it was just, okay, now you can finally do it.
What about you?
I think everybody was real supportive of the choice. I don't think many people really comprehended it. Why would you want to leave all the comforts of home and camp? Well, we weren't camping. It was really pretty comfortable. Although my dishwasher's name was James.
True.
And the most frequently asked question is, can you spend that much time with your husband? Well, yeah, we like each other.
It helps if you like each other.
I couldn't live in that small space with my husband.
We're together 24/7.
Right.
And that was by far the most often asked question.
What, I mean, just talking about being confined together in a tiny space, what I imagine there's long periods of just kind of you're moving forward and there's only so much water you can stare at in a day, What sort of things do you guys do to keep yourselves occupied and entertained while you're underway?
Drive the boat.
I was going to say, underway, we're busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody has to be on watch every minute. You don't necessarily have to stare out and see what's coming every minute, but you have to be up in the cockpit every minute of every day when you're underway. So if you're offshore, we do separate watches, typically from 7 p.m. or 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's 3 hours on, 3 hours off. So you don't see the other person except when you're waking them up. During the day, it's whoever's on watch.
Whoever's
Whoever's
awake.
awake is on watch. So you don't see nearly as much of each other when you're traveling. Now, if you're traveling up the ICW, then you sleep at night. So that's a different story. Or if you're day sailing, then you sleep at night. That's a different story. But the offshore stuff, you hardly see each other at all.
If he's below sleeping, I'll shine a flashlight down onto the bulkhead to wake him up.
And likewise, we try to wake each other up about 10 to 15 minutes before watch starts so they can make hot water. You don't want to drink coffee because you need to go to sleep at the end of your 3 hours. So it's a different life. When we're cruising in the States, we read a lot. We have board games that we play with other cruisers, dominoes primarily. There's a
Farkle.
vice game called Farkle that's very popular amongst cruisers.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of other cruisers, I mean, you pull into ports, you meet the local people, but I imagine you're meeting cruisers from all over the world everywhere you go too. What is that experience like? Is there any particular person that you met that was colorful enough that they kind of really stick out in your memory?
What the experience is like is that's the best part of cruising. That's much more interesting than the places you see. It's a community made up of people who have the same sort of insanity. Everybody has experienced waking up at 3 in the morning in a thunderstorm and the boat's moving, and it's not supposed to be because the anchor's supposed to be not moving. Everybody's done that. I think that's a fair statement. Then,
Actually, I think the deal is there are those who have, those that will, and those that lie.
yeah. And the living in a small space, when you're not in the United States, if you want to have water on your boat, you carry it. 8 pounds a gallon. We carry 100 gallons. That's when you run out, it's 800 pounds you've got to carry back in the boat and put in. Everybody you meet has done that. So the community is exceedingly welcoming. You pull in, drop a hook. Typically, people will come around. Somebody will row over to comment on your boat. You chat. You invite them on board. You have a drink. They stay for dinner. You have new friends.
One of the other guys that we interviewed kind of said that it's a bit of an equalizer. Like different economic backgrounds doesn't matter. They're all cruisers.
Yep, exactly.
Absolutely. You generally don't know people's last names unless you become very good friends with them. You almost never know what they've done for a living before they either retired or quit. It doesn't matter. What's much more important is attitudes about cruising, attitudes about sailing. Economic barriers simply do not exist. And you don't talk politics for the most part. Yeah, for the most part.
There's a guy who made a documentary about Iraq. That's really appealing.
Yeah.
That was the biggest mistake of my career.
You may have a hint by talking to people about what their political persuasion is, but it doesn't matter. Some of our closer friends were people at the far opposite end of the political spectrum from us. Do you want to talk about strange or interesting people? Lita, roll.
Gosh, I don't know. I guess the best haircut I ever got cruising came from a fellow who had been taught to cut his wife's hair before they left Augusta, I think.
Yeah.
And he had a lumber yard.
He was definitely a multimillionaire and gave haircuts to most of the women, and his fee was, if you like it, it's a beer, and if you don't, it's 2 beers.
And it's the best haircut I've ever gotten in my life.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That gets back to an interesting question, too. I mean, just basic deals like getting your hair cut, maybe getting your teeth cleaned, all that sort of stuff. When you're out in some of these foreign countries, you know, what is the accessibility to services?
She cuts my hair. I, in theory, learned to cut hers, but I've been afraid to do it. So
You did it half a time.
yeah,
Half the time?
half a time, not half the time.
Half a time.
Yeah. Other cruisers will provide haircuts.
Had lots of haircuts sitting on a rock on the beach.
Yep.
Given lots of haircuts with somebody sitting on a rock on a beach.
Yep.
Somebody came up and said to James, "I like your hair. Who cut it?" And he said, "She did." He said, "Would you cut my hair?" He said, "Okay." Woo! There goes Proud Mary.
We'll stop with that.